Hello everyone and welcome to IIT's Inspire series, video series where we speak with one of our alumni and a lot more that are lined up. And today we have someone very special who has been a part of IIT's in 1999 and onwards. And you can already see him on the screen, and that is none other than Mr. Hussain Shabbir, who is actually right now in Virtusa working there and heading the as director of the global head of the AWS division in the company. So we have a lot to talk about because we share a mutual history when it comes to education that he has had at IIT. Because when it comes to IIT, we are proud as an organization, as an institution who has produced thousands of graduates that have diverse capabilities and been disseminated around the world with different abilities and into different industries as well. And today, we would like to welcome Mr. Hussain Shabbir on the today's discussion when it comes to speaking about all the way from his beginning to his current state, the journey, what he had so far. Welcome on board, Mr. Shabbir.
Thank you very much for having me on board.
Yes. Okay. So starting off with the conversation, let's go for the very beginning of your, how you started. Let's speak about the life at IIT and a look back about what you have been doing back then, and then how that gradually came to being the person that you are today that we know in the industry.
Sure. So actually, for me personally, the time spent at IIT has been a very memorable one. Apart from the excellent academic content which were taught by the outstanding lecturers, the camaraderie that we built with the diverse set of peers was unforgettable and everlasting. Although many of my batchmates reside in various parts of the world now, we keep reminiscing the good old days at IIT whenever we get a chance to catch up. Of course, there were some tough times as well, especially submitting group assignments and the final year project. But it was all worth the effort as it only resulted in getting to where we are today. I fondly remember presenting my final year project at one of IIT's most reputed events, the Cutting Edge exhibition. A British gentleman who was part of the university delegation and who visited this exhibition at that time expressed his admiration and interest in my project, and actually asked for a copy of my thesis to be kept at the UK University Library as a reference for future students. I felt that it was a great honor for me and a testament that even though we were in Sri Lanka, we were equally, if not more capable as our British peers.
If you can tell us about the project, that would be nice. What was the project about?
The project was an intelligent code converter. So it converts your source code from one programming language to another. And this was predominantly geared towards those old and legacy programming languages where people wanted to convert them to newer languages like Java and so on. So that was the preference, the
conversion.
The final year project.
Oh, sounds great. I think it's important that we come up with different innovations and inventions, because that's the only way forward when it comes to any industry, especially when it comes to an industry like IT. Obviously, we need innovation, and that's the only way forward, because if you stay stagnated with what we have, I think there will be just stagnated in the whole industry as well, and as well as every other industry that's connected to it. Okay, so if you go forward now, you are currently at Virtusa, and we know that. But before that, you were also a visiting lecturer of IIT as well for a short time of approximately 3 years. And so connecting all that, along with all the challenges that you had along the way to become the person that you are today as a personality, let's speak about the transition from the time that you got out of IIT and graduated from IIT to being the person that you are today. How was the path like? How was the journey from there on?
Sure. So following my graduation from IIT, or actually IICS as it was called back then, I joined Virtusa. Within the first year itself, actually, I was entrusted to lead a very business critical project, which was based out of US. So I was required to be there for about 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I was only able to attain such a responsible position so early in my career due to the knowledge, discipline, and the experience taught and instilled in me at IIT. After I returned back to Sri Lanka from USA, I joined Eternum Lanka as its chief technology officer and head of operations.
Mm-hmm.
And I held this position for about 6 years.
Right.
Then I joined Virtusa back pioneer the cloud practice in Sri Lanka. And like you mentioned in the introduction, I'm currently a director and the global head of the AWS Cloud Center of Excellence at Virtusa.
Mm-hmm.
So coincidentally, during the last few years, I have also been visiting guest lecturer at a couple of universities, including IIT.
Oh.
And a lot of the success I had in these senior leadership positions can be directly attributed to the solid foundation that was provided by IIT.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the. I think the foundation that you received from IIT definitely played a major role, because we see now, even at IIT, you being one of the greatest examples, we have a number of other examples that are spread around the globe, and it's good to see that. I mean, as an institution, as a university, what IIT really has pride in is the output. So when it comes to seeing the students or alumni that have been at IIT and now spread across the country and across the world with the legacy, is something that we can definitely, we definitely do celebrate and appreciate. And so I think IIT definitely is grateful for what you have done, because it's only through the alumni that we can gain exposure, as well as the reasons for celebration when it comes to education in the country. Okay, so moving on now. You received the fundamental education from IIT, IT education, and driving towards your goal. When it comes to competitive educational environment, because now we see a lot of organizations, there are so many institutions that are coming up, right? And then you see these different environments that they have to develop inside. So what actually caused you? Now, back then, I understand that maybe you didn't have many of the choices to choose in Sri Lanka, but then again, IIT was one of the institutions that was functioning back then. But you still made the choice to come to IIT. If you can speak about the reasons why that happened, or that why you chose to study at IIT.
Sure, Varuna. So actually, my parents were very supportive of my decision to pursue IT as a career. The IT industry certainly at that time was a wise choice for any school leaver in 1999. The dot-com boom was at its peak. IT was making inroads in Asia, and there was a acute dearth of qualified personnel to man the offices which were springing up everywhere. So after doing our research on the available options, we chose IIT since it offered an internal degree from a well-recognized university in the UK, and had many experienced lecturers, some of whom also belong to the IT industry itself. So they had a wealth of practical knowledge that was beneficial to us students who are eventually going to work in the corporate arena. Of course, the third year internship program was also a key factor, as I was able to apply the theory learned during the first 2 years of the degree and gain valuable insight into the various aspects of working in an enterprise even before formally completing my degree. And similarly, in both the companies that I worked in, we have taken in many students from IIT to complete their internships as well. So we are extremely pleased with our interns from IIT. They come in not only with the theoretical knowledge, but also with experience of working in teams. This makes them more valuable as employees in any organization. And in turn, we ensure that their talent is nurtured and leveraged to the fullest, thereby resulting in them leaving with practical knowledge that they require in order to gain a competitive advantage in the industry.
Okay. Yeah, that's great, because like when you go out to the industry without any experience about how to handle anything, I think that becomes a very, it's not a plus point. It's a negative point basically. But when you go out with abilities to move along with teams and work with teams, that's actually a very plus point, which is something we have, especially at IIT when it comes to the 1 year program, because it's not it's something that the employers also make trust on IIT's output, because they trust that the students that come out of IIT actually have the capability to be able to function on their own for 1 year. That's something great that's coming from you. So being an example, that's actually great news, because then you can see evidently how it has worked out for you and possibly for the prospects as well. Okay, so this question about parents and also about the students who wants to join into the IT industry. Now, there's a sort of a myth. This is actually a myth, because only the people in the IT industry can actually elaborate on this and explain this issue. Because a lot of people think that when it comes to IT education, they tend to they tend to kind of look back and think there are so many IT professionals out there, right? And there are so much of skills and exposure that needs to be collected, and to stand out from the rest, you have to be extremely better than those who are in the same pool. So being someone in the global industry, you haven't just been in Sri Lanka, but you have also worked in the US. And so being someone who has been in that exposure, what do you think about this? Because when it comes to looking at the industry, it's not within Sri Lanka, but also it's global. And when you look at the global context, the kind of requirement at the moment when it comes to, will there ever be an excess of skills is the question. Because if you also have the same skills, do you think will you ever be left out from being able to join into the IT industry?
Yeah, so see, IT has been one of the fastest growing industries in the last many years, right? Both globally and in Sri Lanka. And in comparison to the rest of the world, I have personally noticed that the quality of IT graduates from Sri Lanka is much higher. So, however, being one of the smaller countries, especially in the region, our numbers are a bit smaller. And therefore, the IT industry has also been marked as one of the few that will now be in more demand than before, right? In the post-COVID world.
Yeah.
So I feel that as long as we are able to produce high-caliber IT graduates in Sri Lanka, like we have been doing, there always will be a very good demand for these skills. And of course, we have to make sure that we keep our skills updated in terms of what the industry requires. But there will always be very good demand. So I don't think that is an issue. And like you said, that's probably a myth at the moment.
Okay. Great. So since you mentioned about COVID-19, of course, we can touch upon that and also connect how the IT education also revolves around it. Because when it comes to a number of industries, there are a lot of industries. If you take a list of 100, obviously about 90 of them have been affected by COVID-19, the pandemic globally. But education is not something that has been that severely affected, because we have ways and methods of delivering education through online media. And now this has become a sort of a norm, because like everybody wants to know whether we deliver everything online so that they can keep on learning, because time is precious and education is precious. At the end, you need to have education no matter how much of a hardship you have to go through to get through it. So when it comes to traditional education versus this new norm of learning through online, do you think this will stay for a while? Will this become, because I have seen a number of organizations like institutions, even the Oxford University in the UK, they have decided to provide online every degree that they have, at least most of the degrees that they have at Oxford University, to be delivered online for a while, till 2021 actually. So do you think this will become like a standard at least for the next few years to come?
Yeah, so IT has definitely become an enabler for many industries to go digital, right? Especially in the current context of COVID-19, where it's even more important. It is almost a matter of survival now, right? As many companies cannot afford to ignore technologies such as e-commerce or cloud, etc., right? But in the same context, and also in the new normal that you are referring to, education will also have to adopt being delivered online.
Mm.
That is a given. Like you mentioned, people are not going to wait till things get back to
Yeah.
be able to continue their education.
Mhm.
However, I don't think that this would be a 100% complete changeover to the degrees being completely offered online. Because I see there are a lot of advantages in peers meeting each other in person during their university education phase, right? The personal contact that is maintained when you meet each other. So unless drastic measures are required to continue in the future, um, I certainly hope that some level of personal interaction continues to
Mhm.
remain in university education. Although a lot of content will definitely be coming out on the online medium. So
Mhm.
I would say it's good to have a mix of both.
Okay, great. So yeah, so if we connect that as well, because I think even at IIT we have started to provide education online for all the students, even for master's students these days because of the situation, and we are not supposed to gather the students at IIT. So that's something very important when it comes to an education institution to safeguard the safety and the health of the students. Okay, so this connects to something else as well, because now when it comes to education, someone learns education sometimes to come up with their own ideas. When they have an idea, they can definitely enact it based on the knowledge and the education that they have using technology. So technology connecting with ideas goes to talk about startups. And Sri Lanka has been having a really good startup culture since very recently, because it has been developing and now it has become an epitome of success for most of the entrepreneurs out there. So when it comes to that, from an investor's point of view, because this can be quite a confusing time, because these days, like you mentioned, some of the industries actually sort of paralyzed due to the COVID-19 situation, and there can be less number of opportunities to get invested in your startup business. But so from someone who has been in the industry and also globally, and who has been able to look over at the industry and the startup culture, in a situation like this, what do you think is most important? Do you think it's the skills, or is it the ability to have the longevity when it comes to having an idea, or is it the ability to exhibit the idea? What do you think is the most important factor when it comes to generating an idea into an internship, sorry, into a startup, plus also being able to get someone to, like an angel investor, to invest in your startup organization?
Okay. So I mean, skill is definitely important, but when evaluating potential startups, I predominantly look at three aspects. Something which I call the three P's: the purpose,
Mm-hmm.
the passion, and the plan.
Okay.
So, in terms of the purpose, what is the purpose of this startup? What problem are they trying to fix exactly? And
Mm.
what unique or differentiating way? Because there might be similar ideas out there, and unless you have some level of differentiation, it might be very difficult to compete. The second one is passion. So, how passionate is this person or the team
Mhm.
behind this particular idea? How
Okay.
did this idea actually come about? Is there any special motivation, or are they only doing this to provide them with a source of income? Is there a special story behind this particular idea? So that is the
Mm.
second one that I generally look at. And then the third is the plan. What is their plan to execute this project,
Mm.
especially from a long-term perspective? Anywhere between 3 to 5 years. Have they thought of how they're actually going to make profits from this, when they are going to start making profits from this? Because that is something what the investors also look at.
Yeah.
And most importantly is a lot of investors are coming in not only from a point of financial support. What is their expectation from the investor? Can they help them with their marketing, for example, especially if the investor is already in a similar line of business? And how sustainable is this particular concept that is being proposed?
Mm.
So these are generally the core things that I look at when startups are pitching their ideas, the three P's that I call.
Okay, so that's about the startups, about how they can be successful. At the end, so somehow the idea really matters, regardless of how the longevity is and what kind of issues they try to address with the startup actually does matter, because at the end, that's what will create an impact on the society at the end, about creating and making sure that this startup definitely has a great idea towards the end, and also when it comes to making an impact on the society. So moving on with the next question. Now, this is something quite interesting, because when it comes to work-life balance, a lot of people tend to fail, especially when it comes to IT industry. They complain we have to work 24/7. That's something that we hear very commonly from very many of the professionals out there, especially those who are in the very beginning. They tend to code. And a complaint, not a complaint, it's actually something that's been going around, is that now we have been having this sort of work from home situation, but when it comes to someone working in IT, working from home is not less resting as it sounds, because they always have to keep on working, because there's something that can be done remotely, and they always have to do that. So when it comes to balancing work and the home life, so work-life balance basically, from someone who has been in the industry so many years, and how have you been able to balance it? I mean, we can see that you made the time to be with us today on this discussion as well. So taking all that into account, how do you think one individual should be able to, especially someone in the IT industry, able to make sure that this balance is perfect?
Yes, I think you're right. I mean, IT industry has this stigma on it, that it's very long hours and so on. And initially in your career, you have to put in that kind of long hours in a lot of cases. But you also have to take that step to make sure that you balance your work and your personal life. So it has become extremely important now also with the whole work from home situation. While some of us will definitely have to go the extra mile to overcome the challenges presented to us during these unprecedented times, it is equally important to ensure that we keep a close tab of our physical and mental health and well-being. By doing sufficient exercise, even meditation or yoga, having healthy meals, taking up a hobby which you have been delaying. Some of these things are important and easier to do than others, and you don't have to do everything at once. You can take step by step. You can do in shorter durations. You can do one thing today, maybe another thing tomorrow, but just making a conscious effort to do that. In addition to that, we obviously need to be spending a lot of good quality time with our loved ones. And in current context, maybe even virtually like this, online, due to the current situation. We also need to reach out and help others during this time of crisis, right? We can initially start off with close friends and family. Also look to help the overall community at large, right? In whatever form possible. Not necessarily only in terms of financial help. Sometimes just listening to someone's problems and providing them with a sounding board can go a very long way. I personally have been trying to do all of this within my limited capacity, and I've always felt a huge satisfaction, in doing so.
That's true. I think helping and providing a helping hand at the end in any situation is actually something satisfying. It's self-satisfactory at the end. So that is something that's very important when it comes to having a site that can have a good symbiosis among people, so that they can stay and also make sure that they all collectively reach their success at the end. Okay, so Mr. Hussain, you are an experienced professional in the IT sector, and there are so many prospective students who wants to get into IT. There are also other faction of society who wants to change and switch their profession into becoming an IT expert one day, because there are people who are in other industries who wants to get into IT because they see the importance of being in IT industry. And looking at the professions in Sri Lanka, and how they can fit into industry that will shape-shift in the future. What kind of advice do you think they can, these aspiring IT professionals, do you think that they should be abiding by when it comes to, rules and regulations, and maybe like about certain skill sets, and about how they should generally behave to become an IT professional at the very end of their lives?
Sure, sure. So like I mentioned earlier, see, IT is an ever-growing and ever-changing field. It is also learning things regularly, and anyone interested in this field should also be ready to do so. Look at IT not only as a career that will provide for your livelihood, but also as a tool that will allow you to contribute back to the society in solving its problems, regardless of whether they are predicted or even unpredicted like what we have today, right? We have already seen how we as an industry have helped overcome other issues similar to the current pandemic in the past as well, and should be ready to continue to do so in the future as well.
Okay, great. So that's great advice coming from you. And well, for anyone who is into IT, who wants to get into IT, I think at the end, like you mentioned earlier, I think passion and target is the utmost importance, and everything else follows up along with that. So, well, with that note, we would like to thank you, Mr. Hussain Shabbir, for joining with us today. And well, if I tell you a little bit about you for our viewers, Mr. Hussain Shabbir is actually the Director and Global Head of AWS at Virtusa, and he's been an IIT student. So he was an alumni at IIT in 1999 to 2003. So he was with us, and that is one reason why we wanted to celebrate him and this Inspire video series that we have been conducting, and we'll be having more individuals like this for you to celebrate and for IIT to celebrate, because at the end, individuals like Mr. Shabbir are the reasons why we as an institution take pride when it comes to providing education in the country, and also bringing global education to the Sri Lankans in the country. So thank you so much, Mr. Shabbir, for joining in today. And we are extremely happy that we had you on board. And thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Warren, for having me.
Right. And with that, we are closing down today's discussion, because we'll be having more things coming up when it comes to discussions in the next few weeks. And well, if I tell you a little bit about IIT, IIT is actually the first pioneering institution in the country that has brought British education to the country, and has been able to provide that successfully for the last 30 years, and we will celebrate the 30th year this year happily. And on that note, we'd love to say goodbye to you. We'll be joining with more content like this in the future on IIT's Facebook and also Instagram, as well as YouTube channels that you must already be following. Otherwise, you can just search them up, and definitely follow us on those as well. Thank you so much once again, and have a great day ahead.